Hello. Hi, and happy Wednesday. I hope you are doing well and excited for this conversation about one of my favorite topics, introverts and introvertedness, and three ways that, or rather, reasons why pharmacists or other healthcare professionals who are introverts can actually be successful freelance medical writers, health content writers, any type of freelance medical or health writer, um, type of business that you might be interested in. So I really want to dive into some of the reasons why introvertedness can actually be an advantage in these situations. Hey, Team Live. Hey, Marcello. Why introvertedness can be an advantage in some of these situations, and also ways that you can lean into and even leverage those introverted aspects of yourself in order to be a more successful freelance medical writer. So, for those who don't know, my name is Megan. I am a public health pharmacist turned health content strategist. And I run a program called Health Professionals to Health Writers that teaches healthcare professionals how to how to replace a portion of their income through freelance health content writing. And so, in working with a lot of students over the past year and almost a half. I can't believe it's been that long since I've been running the program. But over this time, obviously, I've encountered people with a lot of different personalities, and several of them have been introverts like me. And so this conversation comes up a lot, and I thought that this was important to share and discuss, even with folks who have not yet started their freelance medical writing journeys, because I know sometimes a part of the reason for that hesitancy to start is fearing that being an introvert means that you can't be a freelancer or that you wouldn't make a good freelancer. So I kind of want to bust some of those myths, and I have 3 points that I want to share with you all. Two of them are related to the client-facing side of freelance medical writing. So, like, obviously, as a freelancer, you have to have clients, and or you get to have clients. And so, along with doing client work comes the requirement to engage with others, network with others, build relationships with others, pitch and sell to others to a certain extent. And then one of the tips is going to be more so on the writing side, which is kind of what we more often think about when it comes to freelance medical writing. So the first reason why pharmacists who are introverts can be successful freelance medical writers is because on the client side, you get to, or you tend to engage in networking and relationship building with more care and intention. So one of the stereotypes about introverts is that we don't like small talk, right? With like the little chit chat, oh, how is the weather? How is traffic? That kind of thing. It's not really our forte. It's not what we do well because we are interested in deeper conversations and more interesting conversations. And it just takes a lot of energy to keep up that small talk. Because of that, when we do build relationships with people, have conversations with people, we have the ability to have more meaningful and more significant and more meaty conversations. And that is really helpful when it comes to building up your freelancing roster, because as you're able to have those deeper, more insightful conversations, those have a better tendency to develop into a more meaningful client relationship. So those conversations and connections that you're able to build on the front end will kind of evolve and grow a long time as you're able to actually turn some of those conversations into like paid client relationships. So really being able to build those deeper relationships and connections is an advantage. Now, a way to leverage this skill is to do your background research when you have identified a client or a company that you would be interested in engaging with as a freelance writer. When you do your background research, you're able to find out information, points, ideas, events, successes, basically anything that the company has going for it, or that the client has going for it, that you can use to make that connection during the conversations that you have with them. So you feel well prepared to be able to talk about something that actually matters. Whereas, if you don't necessarily do that background research and you're coming into a conversation blind, it can be harder to figure out a starting point for that conversation. And as we already established, as introverts, we're not really great at that whole small talk situation. Or even if you're great at it, like, you don't enjoy doing it. So that's going to impact your client relationship down the line. So my tip on how to leverage this characteristic is to do your background research in advance, and then use that background research as you approach conversations with potential clients for true relationship building. Amy, yes. I think if there were, maybe, I don't know, can you think of examples of other like common small talk topics that people kind of bring up? I feel like traffic and weather are the top two, but I know there are plenty of others, and I don't love any of them. But that's really interesting to hear that as an extrovert, you would rather not either. So the second tip that I wanted to mention, or the second way that pharmacists who are introverts can be successful freelance medical or health writers, is in addition to not being energized by small talk, we also tend to listen more and listen first, and talk less or talk later. And because of that, it means that we are often listening more closely than maybe some of our counterparts who are more eager to talk or to speak, and who are not listening as closely. Now, if you're anything like me and you're an introvert, you know that sometimes this can backfire in some ways, because people make assumptions about people who tend to listen more than they talk. But one of the advantages of being great listeners is that we are very observational, or observant, I should say, very observant, and able to pick up on cues that can be helpful, that can be useful. Sometimes things that other people might have overlooked if they, weren't listening as closely. And so the ability to observe closely and listen closely is really an advantage, because we can develop a deep understanding of what it is that another person is saying, or what it is that they're not saying, right? Reading between the lines, what's being implied, what's being intentionally left out. These are all things that introverts are well positioned to detect, because we are very observant in conversations and we listen closely. And now, I'm thinking about all of the things that I've heard in like a corporate or professional development kind of setting. And a lot of times, this is an attribute that we are encouraged to change, or to actively try to speak more than we listen, or to be more vocal or more verbal. And that's not to say that in some cases we shouldn't be, but one of my suggestions for leveraging this characteristic is to not be tempted to hide it or be the opposite, just because you think it's better to be more vocal or more verbal, because being able to listen closely to what a client or a prospective client is telling you is invaluable as a freelancer. What you can do in a way to leverage this is listen closely, observe, synthesize that information, and like feed it back to your clients or your potential clients in that conversation. Not just to do it, but to, one, gain clarity on what it is that that client might need, to help clarify if there might be any discrepancies, or maybe something they meant to mention but didn't. And also, it just helps instill confidence in that other party that you get it, that you understand them. And what a prospective client really wants to know is that you understand their business need, and that and they feel that if you do have that good understanding, then you'll be better able to address that business need. So being a good listener and very observant is a skill that you definitely want to be leveraging as a freelance medical writer. So we talked about engaging in networking, listening closely, and being observant. The last kind of reason or tip that I wanted to share with you all is, again, on the writing side of things. So if you joined the conversation a little late, what I mentioned was that in freelancing, you have the client facing side because you have to have clients as a freelancer. Then you have the actual writing side, which is what most of us tend to think about. On the writing side, one of the advantages of being an introvert is that we tend to enjoy the solitude and the personal time that writing affords. When you are in the writing parts of your work, sometimes people feel a little lonely. And I won't lie, sometimes it can be lonely, especially if you are working primarily as a freelance writer and you don't have like a full time or part time role where you have colleagues around you. Sometimes it can get a little isolating, right? Depending on what else you have going on in your life. However, I feel that extreme extroverts are more likely to find difficulty with that than introverts are because we enjoy and are re-energized by time alone and time with ourselves. So an advantage of being an introvert in this case is being able to enjoy that solitude and really relish in it, and also because you are able to kind of settle into that space, it has this added benefit of helping you learn how to express yourself more fully as a writer, right? Sometimes as introverts, we find it either uncomfortable to, unnecessary to, or I don't know, all the other all the other elements that can decide whether we feel comfortable verbalizing something in a particular space. And I think a lot of introverts have a tendency to be better at communicating their thoughts through a written form than through a verbal form. And so being able to kind of be in that space of aloneness and settle in and really feel like you're expressing yourself more fully through your health content writing or your whatever type of medical writing you're engaging in, that can be something that is advantageous for us, whereas other types of writers might have a more difficult time. My tip there on leveraging that is to relish in it. Relish in the alone time of writing because it's actually only a percentage of the freelancing experience. And I think that, especially on the medical and health writing side, for healthcare professionals who are interested in those types of writing, we can be hyper focused on the writing itself, but kind of ignore all of the other facets of the freelancing journey, of the communications journey that are a part of this experience. So you're not always going to be just sitting at your desk writing by yourself. That's a portion of what you do as a freelance writer, but it's not all of it. So relish in that time. Um, I hope that this was helpful, that you learned something about yourself as an introvert that could be advantageous in a freelance medical writing or health content writing journey. And I would love to see your key takeaways in the comments if you're catching this live or on the replay. And there was a key takeaway from this conversation. Feel free to drop it in the comments and we can continue the convo there. Thank you for tuning in and sharing so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good night.